go. Everybody's ready to go. Nominated 5, 4.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, Kasparian with you guys. I'm amped up on a Tuesday afternoon. Almost night for some of you guys. All right, awesome show ahead for you guys. Part of the reason I'm amped up. I'm also amped up because of this shout out from one of our donors. Just wanted to wish a happy birthday to our very own Anna Kasparian on behalf of Brett and Heather. Happy birthday, Anna.
Awesome, thank you. Super sweet. And thank you to Brett and Heather for reminding Cenk that it's my birthday, because he probably wouldn't know otherwise.
No, you reminded me this morning, but other than that, of course I would never remember.
Oh yeah, I did. Not to be like annoying. I did it in the context of like a story or something.
Oh, of course, you know, like
okay.
Anyway. Like definitely within the context. Anyway, Brett and Heather, thank you guys. We appreciate it. And I see your guys' name every single day. You know, we have the donor wall. Since we're not in the studio, I have the donor wall in my house, in my office. I look at your guys' names every day. I put up Fernando, Jamie and Mike, Zane, John, Daniel, Mark, T, Katie, Monica, Rima, all last night. You guys will see that in some of the commercials that are coming up. Folks who give $1,000 go on the donor wall. Plus they get the super cool press on hoodie. So tyt.com/go to make that happen. Let me check it on the thermometer, see how we're doing. Boom, whenever it comes to $32,428. Okay, can I see 35,000? That's ambitious. Can I see 35,000 before the end of the show? Let's have fun. Let's see if we can do it. Okay. So you guys are also get the press on T-shirt for $127. And by the way, if you want to name things, because Kelly from Texas just gave again, she named half the things in the studio, including JR's chair. John named the hallway, etc. Go to tyt.com/press on to see what you could name at the different levels, okay? Love you guys. All right, Anna, take it away.
All right, well, we begin with some updates on economic news. Vocal opponents of federal spending, people who have fought very aggressively to lower the tax rate for the wealthiest people in this country, actually took quite a bit of money in the so-called PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, that Congress passed in response to the economic destruction of coronavirus. Now, I bring up people like, let's say, Grover Norquist, because remember, they are taking advantage of essentially a social safety net that was funded by US taxpayers, but was not funded by many of the millionaires and billionaires who have been able to dodge taxes for a long time, thanks to the help of people like Grover Norquist. So let me give you some details that we've learned through various reports, including Forbes. They write that Americans for Tax Reform Foundation, which says it educates taxpayers on the true cost of government and the realities of costly government programs, received between $150,000 and $300,000 in loans. So these are the small business loans that are supposed to encourage small companies to avoid firing their employees. If they avoid firing anyone, these loans will later be forgiven. But I bring this up because Americans for Tax Reform Foundation, I mean, no, let them go, right? Go find other work. These are people who literally work in destroying, the economic stability of this country by giving massive tax handouts to the wealthiest. And then we end up, socializing the failures of companies that haven't paid their fair share of taxes. There's a bunch of other examples. Go ahead, Cenk.
Yeah, so look, I'm gonna give you an awesome quote from Grover Norquist in a second. And we have one organization even better than Americans for Tax Reform that took PPP. But first, let me just clarify. PPP is a good program. And we've explained on the show that the part that it affects small businesses is a rare piece of legislation that is well crafted, okay? And not only well intentioned, but well crafted. What it does is, and I explained this at the very beginning when they were even debating the issue, and then when they passed it, it incentivizes you very well to keep your employees, and it works. So I don't begrudge even significant sized companies in taking it, as long as they use it to keep their employees. So God bless. Like, I'm not in that camp of people, oh, I can't believe somebody took shake and stake and steak and shake, and all those folks took it or whatever. If you're keeping the employees, that's what the whole point was, etc. We'll get to Kanye West later. And then the right wing says like, oh yeah, so progressives took it too. Yeah, progressives think the government can help people. It's the most logical thing in the world to take PPP if you're in that position. Norquist, on the other hand, said that he wanted to shrink government to a size that it was so small that you could drown it in a bathtub. And now you're gonna take government money to keep yourself from drowning? Oh, hell no. No. You didn't argue for all those billionaire tax cuts and tell me about how you want to drown government. And then the minute you're having any kind of troubles, government, please help me, government, please. Yeah.
No, these people are the worst. Yeah, they're the worst. In fact, so ATR founder Grover Norquist has criticized one really important part of that stimulus bill, and that was the unemployment insurance provision of the CARES Act, which helps to keep people afloat during this pandemic, average people who have been laid off as a result of the pandemic, which he says delays recovery, and signed a letter urging lawmakers not to approve a second stimulus bill. This is the type of dishonest person that is given like equal credibility on cable news when it comes to debating tax policy or the social safety net or any of that. They never bring up the fact that they're massive hypocrites, that even when they don't need any help from the government, once it's offered to them, they're all for it. While, by the way, simultaneously fighting other parts of that legislation that, of course, helps average Americans. And they never disclose that. They just treat Grover Norquist as if there's some sort of like sophistication in his ideology, when in reality, the only thing he ever thinks about is how can I pay as little as in taxes as possible, but have the general public, socialize the losses of corporate failures and privatize the gains. That's who Grover Norquist is. But that's not the only right-wing institute or libertarian institute that's in favor of this. So the Ayn Rand Institute, Ayn Rand is a hero for libertarians who want small government. Named for conservative philosopher Ayn Rand, received a loan of between $350,000 and $1 million, which it called partial restitution for government-inflicted losses.
Sure it is. Whatever gets you through the night. Hey, it sounds like you're begging for government money. What happened, libertarians? Oh, please, government, give me money. Oh, I'm such an Ubermensch. I'm a Superman. I don't need anybody. I did this with my own bootstrap. Government, please give me money. Please, I'm begging you. By the way, there is some logical sense to it, because Ayn Rand herself did the same exact thing. After railing against the government, later in her life, she accepted government handouts and said, well, I mean, I want the money. Oh, that's what I thought, Ubermensch. What now?
No, what's even, I gotta give you this statement from Harry Binswagner, who's from the Ayn Rand Institute. He says, it would be a terrible injustice for pro-capitalists to step aside and leave the funds to those indifferent or actively hostile to capitalism. The organization will take any relief money offered to us. You guys don't want people to pay into these programs. This is funded by taxpayers, okay? So, corporations like Amazon, for instance, which paid $0 in federal taxes last year, thanks to Trump's tax cuts, which, by the way, organizations like these absolutely loved and were fighting for. They get to take advantage, if they need it, of these socialized programs, while again simultaneously fighting back against any part of the legislation, any type of policy that actually benefits people who have worked hard, they have paid their fair share, and deserve to have a social safety net save them when something out of their control, like a pandemic, strikes. Okay, right. And for them to be like, oh, no, this money shouldn't go to this socialized program shouldn't benefit people who criticize capitalism. No, it shouldn't benefit you. It shouldn't benefit you, okay, period.
All right, Harry Bigglesworth, or whatever your name is. I went to Wharton, I studied capitalism. I don't remember this section where you beg for government money to quote unquote defend capitalism. That's not really how it works. You either live like a capitalist every day, Cenk, or you don't, okay? And so no part of capitalism says, the government should give me $1 million so I could write think pieces against government handouts. That's not a thing, and you could do any justification you like, but we all know it's BS. And thank you for proving our point for us. Yes, it turns out the government can help people. It depends on the situation. It depends on what they do. If they craft it right, doesn't mean government is always right, not anywhere near it. But sometimes government can be really helpful when you need a hand up. And it turns out Ayn Rand needed a hand up. And now she's like, I'm taking it, but only because of capitalism.
Also, Cenk, one question for you, and this is a genuine question. I'm not trying to be snarky or sarcastic or rhetorical. These are basically lobbying groups, right? These are organizations that lobby government to cut taxes in this case, defund the social safety net, social programs. So they're usually funded by big donors. That's how they make their money, because they don't provide a good or a service. So why are they reliant on government aid in this case when the pandemic really doesn't hurt them in any way? They're continuing to do their lobbying. They will take giant donations from, people with corporate interest groups and all of that, the Koch brothers, people like that. That's how they get funded. And then they funnel that money toward all sorts of lobbying to cut taxes. So what I'm trying to understand is, how exactly did the pandemic hurt them to the point where they're worried about losing their employees due to the virus? It's just complete and utter nonsense. And more context for this story, there are actual small businesses that are owned by minorities that have not been approved for this money that was actually supposed to be set aside for them to some extent. $60 billion of this money was supposed to be set aside specifically for minority-owned businesses. And a lot of these minority-owned businesses have had a difficult time getting approved because the middleman in this case is the bank, right? Big banks get to decide who does and does not qualify for these loans, for these small business loans. And so the same institutionalized issues that we have when it comes to minorities, getting the capital that they need to invest in their businesses certainly plays out in this context as well.
Yeah, so there's a very real and nuanced answer to this, which is that this program was purposely overbroad. So it was to help small businesses, but they also gave it to nonprofits. But when you give it to nonprofits, which most of them do wonderful work, and I'm thrilled that they got it, you can't say, we're gonna give it to nonprofits, but not give it to libertarian jerks who think that there should be no government money at all. You can't make that ideological distinction because the government's actually doing the right thing. They should not make an ideological distinction, even if it goes to giant hypocrites like Americans for Tax Reform and Ayn Rand Institute. So that's why they're getting it. Now, were they actually hurt? It's impossible to know. It's possible that some of those billionaires that fund them took some hits on their businesses. I remember covering the story of one billionaire laughing and saying, "No, I could go for 20 years without this affecting my business because I have so much money." I forget that guy's name, but we covered it on the show. But maybe not necessarily for everyone who's donating. So their donations might be off. But I don't want to make laws to do against these groups so that we could be perfectly consistent, because then you'll endanger other great groups that actually do need the money to maintain their staff. So I understand why they were overly broad. Here, I'll give you a super quick example. So for example, like, you need to protect people being able to sue their employers. If you say, hey, if it's a frivolous lawsuit, then the person suing has to get the money, has to pay the legal costs of the person that they sued. Well, that would prevent frivolous lawsuits, but it would also prevent real lawsuits because people would be afraid to take on that kind of risk. So some of those laws have real downsides, but they need to be overly broad to have as much protection as possible. That's why PPP is structured that way, and it's correct. These guys, if they were actually principled, should not take the money at all. But obviously they're not principled. Their only principle is greed. So they lived by that and said, gimme, gimme, gimme. I love government money when it comes to me.
And then one final thing that I'll mention is, we've been hearing about a lot of different highly profitable luxury brands, for instance, that qualified for this program, including high-end designers like Oscar de la Renta, Vera Wang. But what about celebrities like Kanye West, who just this week announced some sort of deal with the Gap that would, bring in quite a bit of money? Well, it turns out that his company Yeezy also took some money from this program. Yeezy, an LLC formed by Kanye West and clothing designer, who's also a clothing designer, received a loan between $2 million and $5 million, according to SBA. The company disclosed that it saved 106 jobs because of the program. And look, Cenk, as you know, like, we care about saving the jobs. That's the important part of this program. That's what the intention of the program is. It's just interesting to see certain small business owners consistently get rejected for these small business loans, while people who brag about their wealth on a constant basis, take advantage of it. They get approved for it, and so it is what it is.
I think Yeezy should have been approved. I think, I can't tell if they really did save the 106 jobs, but the point was to save the 106 jobs. And if it did that job, I don't particularly care how rich the owner is. Having said that, the Kanye West and Kim Kardashians of the world are unbearable. After they get that money, then they rub it in our face. I mean, the tweet where Kim Kardashian talked about how their son has 14 luxury horses. I don't even know what they are, designer horses, whatever they are, Kardashian horses. What I don't know. A Frisian. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, that's like, oh, I got government money and I saved some jobs, and then I bought 14 luxury horses. You rub your face in it. I find them to be the most unbearable people on planet Earth. Nonetheless, I don't mind them getting the PPP loans as long as it saves jobs.
When we come back from the break, we'll talk about how Stephen Miller's wife is just as bad as he is, maybe even worse. And I didn't think that was possible. So we'll share that story and more when we
need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
return.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Everybody remember to go to aspiration.com/TYT. Put your money where they're not going to put it into fossil fuels. Save the planet, save money. Makes a ton of sense. It's a win-win. Aspiration.com/TYT. Plus, they'll plant 10 trees if you open up an account. Going to our members. Anna's right, though, writes in. Happy birthday, Anna. We love your salty shenanigans.
Thank you.
Burrito Bandito writes in, if we didn't have a pandemic, Anna could have had a TYT birthday party in studio, and maybe we could have watched her break a baby Trump pinata with her big microphone or her hubby's baseball bat. Very creative. Yeah. I like it. And then on YouTube Super Chat, a ton of shout outs to Anna. I'll go as quickly as I can. Caroline Roberts, love you, Anna. Happy birthday. Jennifer McIntosh, happy birthday, Anna. Keep it salty. Ernie Montes de Oca writes in, happy birthday, Anna, for my pups, Indy and Sequoia. It Getter 9 writes in, happy birthday to Casper the Salt Shaker, and thank you to the whole TYT for your hard work. We'll make it through this rough year together. Well, thank you for saying that, and there's a lot of other wonderful comments as well. But I just wanted to say there, I'm not saying a birthday gift for Anna would be great at TYT.com/go. I mean,
you're the worst. You're the worst.
Can I ask for that on your behalf? I don't know. Is that a thing?
I mean, sure, go ahead. But like, you're hilarious. You cracked me up, Cenk.
I agree.
No, but honestly, like nothing would make me happier to keep doing what I love. And I'm not able to do that unless we have your support. So thank you for supporting us throughout the years. Whether you're able to donate to this fundraiser or not, just viewing this show, sharing this show when we're live, all of that has helped get us through the most difficult times. So thank you so much. I'm
sorry, and I gotta read a couple more because they're amazing. Eclectic Miscellaneous says, happy birthday, Anna. Here's $7.07 donation to TYT for your 7/7 birthday. I'd give $707, but my wife would demand to know why I don't get her $700 gifts.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could do both. Anyway, no, seriously, I love how funny and honest you guys are. Christina says, happy birthday, Queen. But I want to read one non-birthday one because it's a really good point. Bonito Yarborough wrote in on YouTube Super Chat. Ayn Rand institutions said they took PPP loan money as a partial restitution for past government-inflicted losses. Then they shouldn't care if African Americans get restitution for the losses the South inflicted on our ancestors. Love it. Bonita's such a great point. That's why I love doing this show with you guys. I wish I'd have thought of that. So thank you for writing in with that. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. Stephen Miller's wife, Katie, is just as gross as he is when it comes to the way immigrants are treated and the way that they think about people of color in this country and elsewhere. And nothing makes that clearer than what Jacob Soboroff shared in his upcoming book. It's called Separated, and as you can imagine, it covers some of the zero tolerance policy that took place at the border, where children were taken away from their parents, children were placed in cages separately from their parents, and dozens of people have died, including I know for a fact 7 children, but the numbers are likely higher. There's been a lack of reporting coming from Border Patrol recently, so the exact number is difficult to follow. But nonetheless, here's what Katie Miller shared with Jacob Soboroff in one of the interviews that he had with her. She said, quote, "My family and colleagues told me that when I have kids, I'll think about the separations differently, but I don't think so. DHS sent me to the border to see the separations for myself, to try to make me more compassionate, but it didn't work." So just how bad are the conditions in these detention facilities? Again, so bad that dozens of asylum seekers have died. In June of 2019, a team of lawyers actually spoke to the Associated Press and said that they found children and teenagers held in a facility near El Paso, Texas, without adequate access to food, water, or sanitation. The Inspector General for the Department of Homeland Security also released a report last year saying that according to program directors and mental health clinicians, separated children exhibited more fear, feelings of abandonment, and post-traumatic stress than did children who are not separated. Some children expressed acute grief that caused them to cry inconsolably. And this type of trauma, of course, has a long-term impact, negative impact on these children's lives. But these are the children who managed to survive the cruelty. There have been plenty of children who have not survived it. One of them was actually a 16-year-old asylum seeker by the name of Carlos Gregorio Hernandez Vasquez. We covered his death on this show, but I want to just go to a video really demonstrating how horrific his death really was because of the neglect in this detention facility.
For almost a half hour, Vasquez appears to be doubling over in pain. After falling to the floor, he then walks to the toilet where he collapses. Then a 4-hour gap in the video. Records obtained by ProPublica show an agent logged welfare checks, but the gap in the video raises questions about whether that actually happened. When the video comes back, Vasquez is in the same spot. The cellmate is then seen calling the guards, who realize he's dead. The video contradicts Customs and Border Protection's earlier statements that Vasquez was found unresponsive during a welfare check.
So Cenk, Miller's wife had some thoughts on Cuban Americans as well, which I'll get to in a second, but I wanted you to comment on the story so far.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm happy for Stephen and Katie Miller. They found each other, peas in a pod. She, of course, Katie Miller, way more important than being Stephen Miller's wife, is the spokesperson for the vice president. So she holds a very powerful job in the government. It's interesting that the Department of Homeland Security sent her to the border. DHS is now no one's softy, and especially under the Trump administration. But they're like, wow, this Katie Miller is so monstrous that we might want to send her to see how bad we really are. And because she's saying the story, that DHS sent her so that she could be more compassionate. And she gets there and she's like, oh no, that didn't work at all, man. I remain as uncompassionate as I have ever been. That'll show them. And so it's not surprising, I suppose, that her and Stephen Miller found each other in these conservative circles. But it's a curious thing to brag about in a situation like this. And it's the main defining trait of both Stephen and Katie and a lot of these conservatives, especially the Trump era, is complete lack of empathy.
Lack of empathy, and also they're just stupid. And I'm not just saying that to insult them. Like Katie Miller, based on what I'm about to read to you, is stupid, because if she were smart, if she were strategic, she would not say what I'm about to read to you. She also told Jacob Soboroff, quote, I believe if you come to America, you should assimilate. Why do you need to have a little Havana? So she's referencing Cuban Americans and their culture, which is a curious group to pick out, because most of them are actually Republicans. Most of them support Donald Trump, and needlessly antagonizing them isn't gonna work out so well for you. Now, that's only if the media does its job and they talk about this and shed light on the fact that Donald Trump and people who work for him have utter disdain for everyone who isn't wealthy and who isn't white. And so that includes Cuban Americans, the same Cuban Americans who just last month in Miami Lakes held a rally in support of Donald Trump. They wanted to speak out against Black Lives Matter. And the group that you're about to hear from, the group that hosted this rally in Miami Lakes, is titled Cubans for Trump. So let's just get a little taste of what this group looks like.
What's your name, ma'am? Are you here attending the protest?
Blue Lives Matter. I can't believe it. You come from Massachusetts.
I'm a reporter for the Miami Herald.
You know what? I'm in police. Miami-Dade police.
You're a Miami Lakes police officer?
Police officer?
What's your name, ma'am?
I don't want to do you. Miami-Dade police.
Now you think that Trump supporter with that thick Cuban accent is someone who's respected or loved or valued by the Katie Millers of the world? Of course not. And it is incredible because they can really expose their utter disdain for their own voters and supporters. And usually they don't pay any consequences for it, but it's just amazing. Like, why little Havana out of any group that you could attack, she decided to attack a group that's actually supportive of Trump.
See,
because she's stupid.
Yeah, I hear you, and that's a compelling case. But for Cuban Republicans, they think they're special. No, the Republicans that are in charge, like Trump and Stephen Miller and Katie Miller, they like us Latinos because we agree with them. No, they think you just look like all the other Latinos. They're happy that you're a sucker and you vote for them, but at the end of the day, she can't even tell the difference between the people that you like putting in cages and you. She would put you in a cage. She would separate you from your kids. Why did you use the example of little Havana? Because when talking about the issue of separation at the border, that has nothing to do with Cubans other than the fact that the only thing that connects them is that they're Latinos. So, in fact, let me read you the beginning of that quote because it's really instructive. Soboroff asked her, "It didn't work about the compassion. I'll never forget what I saw. Seriously, are you a white nationalist?" He asked Katie Miller. And Katie Miller responds, "No, but." First of all, I can end it right there. Are you a white nationalist? No, but. What's about to follow is something that's going to sound white nationalist. And then the rest of the quote, "No, but I believe if you come to America, you should assimilate. Why do we need to have a little Havana?" Cuban, Mexican, Guatemalan, whatever, they're all brown to Katie Miller. She doesn't know. And by the way, what does assimilation have anything to do with child separation at the border? The only thing that connects those two totally disparate issues is Katie Miller's hatred of brown Latinos. And so if you're a Cuban Republican and you think they're on your side, they certainly don't think you're on their side. They just think you're a convenient sucker.
So let's talk about Trump's frenemies. This is one of my favorite stories. This is the chisme. Okay, this is what I live for. So we've all seen how Donald Trump is struggling in recent polls. In fact, for several weeks in a row, Joe Biden leads in general election polls in the double digits. And when it comes to Trump's approval rating, he's not doing well either. So why is it that Republican lawmakers haven't pivoted to an anti-Trump framing when they're running their reelection campaigns? What are Republican consultants advising them on? Well, it turns out that based on what Tim Miller over at Rolling Stone found out by talking to 9 Republican consultants, they're all afraid, they're all weak, but they're definitely afraid of Donald Trump and think he's a monster. So let's start off with what Miller reports in Rolling Stone. He says that these swamp creatures were never the biggest Trumpers in the first place. His initial campaign team was an assortment of D-listers and golf course grunts rather than traditional GOP admin. So why, as Trump's numbers plummet, are these establishment rhinos continuing to debase themselves to protect someone who is politically faltering and couldn't care less about them? So again, as I mentioned, he talked to 9 different Republican consultants who are currently working on consulting various Republican candidates. None of them were willing to go on the record for obvious reasons. Once you hear their quotes, you'll know why. But first, what do they really think of Trump? Well, one consultant says, "We haven't worked for anybody who seriously thinks the guy has it all together." Another Republican consultant said, "I told very high-ranking people in the Trump administration that it hasn't been like this since October of 2006, when President Bush's numbers were tanking all over fallout from the Iraq War, Katrina, and the Mark Foley scandal." Another Republican consultant says every shred of evidence points to a likely ass-kicking in the fall. A different person says, "Well, it's as bad as it gets right now." And finally, right now, most campaigns are thanking baby Jesus every day. The election isn't held today. So that's what they really think about Donald Trump, but you wouldn't know it based on how Republican candidates are campaigning right now, but while they take the advice from these consultants.
Yeah, I love this story. Part of the reason why I was so excited about today's show, we've had so many great stories. By the way, if you want to get the whole show, tyt.com/join or hit the join button below on YouTube. So this story is great on a couple of counts. First of all, it has all the consultants and GOP strategists saying secretly what they believe, which is, of course, Trump's an idiot. But by the way, they don't necessarily disagree with him on policy, and they hate the same people that he hates. So I'm not absolving them of anything. If you read all the quotes, they're like, I despise the media and I despise Democrats and I despise all of Trump's opponents. They leave out the racism, but that's among the people that Trump despises. So they generally agree. It's not that they don't like Trump's hatred. They just don't like how incompetent he is. They're like, God, if he was better at this, we'd all win with our hatred and it would be awesome. But he's just such a terrible manager. And so that's why they're frustrated. But the real culprit here is what nobody will talk about, Republican voters. Because the reason they cannot break from Trump is because over 80% of Republicans, even in the worst of times, right now, they're thanking baby Jesus the election isn't today, otherwise they'd get annihilated. And even now, over 80% of Republican voters say Trump or die, okay? So if you're mad about Trump or you're saying, hey, why don't these Republican politicians break from Trump? What you're actually saying is, why don't they break from their own voters? They're not gonna break from their voters. And the Republican voters are actually even more toxic, especially on the social issues and the cultural issues, than the Republican politicians and even the scumbag Republican strategist consultants. And I'm gonna get to why they're scumbags in a second if that hasn't been clear enough already, and how selfish they are. But at the end of the day, the cancer is the actual voters themselves that love Trump specifically for his hatred.
Right. So Trump's approval rating among Republican voters prior to the pandemic and the protests throughout the country was, somewhere around 96%. Because of how badly he's done in responding to various issues, he's down somewhere in the 80s, right? But that's still incredibly high among the Republican electorate. So you're right. Their Republican candidates are afraid of distancing themselves too much or criticizing Trump, because that would mean that Trump would attack them and that could really hurt them with the Republican constituency. But I want to give some of the quotes from these Republican consultants, because they're refusing to advise their candidates to attack Trump in any way, despite the low approval rating overall, among all Americans. And so one Republican consultant told Rolling Stone, there are two options. You can be on this hell ship, or you can be in the water drowning. Which I think is a pretty powerful statement, because really, the Republican consultants, and the same goes for Democratic consultants, doesn't matter, consultants in politics, bottom of the barrel people for the most part, right? Like, they don't really care about the direction of the country. What they do care about is how they can benefit financially and career-wise with the direction the country's going in. So in this case, they might hate Donald Trump. They might think it's absolute hell to be a Republican consultant trying to navigate Republican campaigns in the age of Donald Trump. But they're still making money, and that's more important to them than maybe switching gears and going into a different career altogether, or maybe doing something that has at least some level of morality. One other person says, no dissent is tolerated with Trump's base, and if my candidate is going to win, it's going to be by 1 or 2%, and can't afford to lose any votes on the pro-Trump flank. One other person says, my candidate didn't vote for Trump. But we're running ads right now about being a big Trump supporter, because in that district, draping yourself in Trump is still a good decision. And look, if anything, if there's anything to take away from this story, this is what I hope that I leave you guys with and that you remember. For all of the chest pumping or bumping, whatever, the nonsense about how strong the Republican Party is and how they're all about morality and principles and nonsense. No, they're all scared. They're terrified of literally the most incompetent president in American history. So one consultant told Rolling Stone, the idea of distancing from Trump, if it's discussed, is discussed very quietly. It's discussed one-on-one. You don't talk about it on a conference call. Maybe someone would, but let's just say it hasn't happened yet. And I'm on a lot of these calls. So in other words, like you have to be super secretive, like pull out your burner phone, don't do a conference call, make sure you don't put anything in writing because it'll come back to you. And if Trump, big bad Trump finds out, you're gonna get it. I mean, it's just, these people are pathetic.
So last couple of important things here. So first of all, they're not wrong in their calculation. I need you guys to understand this. So if number one, if they pulled away from Trump too early, they would get primaried and lose their primary. That's just basic math. If over 80% of Republicans support Trump, no matter what he does, and during the primaries it was over 90%, they would have lost, and a lot of them did lose if they just deviated a couple of, just a shade, a couple of inches away from Donald Trump. And that there's a graveyard full of Republican so-called moderates who was actually massive right-wingers, but who said, yeah, but Trump looks a little stupid, doesn't he? You're a gunner. So they're all lobbyists and retired now. So there's good reason for them not to deviate, but it's not just the primaries, guys. In the general election, the way that Republicans win is by getting much bigger voter turnout than Democrats, historically. So if you criticize Trump, you depress your own voter base, less of them show up to vote for you, and then you're doubly screwed and have no chance of winning. That's why that consultant was saying, if I lose 1 or 2 points from my base, I got no chance of winning. I got to try to squeak by tricking people into thinking that I'm not that pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I just got to be quiet about Trump so I could squeak by. Now that leads me to my huge criticism of the press. The press knows that these consultants and all these politicians are scum, that they purposely lie to you in every conceivable way, not in order to inform you, but in order to trick you. But they never say it. They never say, oh, well, your Republicans are great and they're moderate Republicans. And Susan Collins disagrees. And look at this person and the brave Republican and Chuck Grassley and blah, 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 blah. No. They're all doing this calculation. Why isn't every political article about what political reality is, as opposed to the theater that these consultants are presenting? The press credulously covers the theater as if it's real, and that's what hurts the country the most. And I'll end on this quote because it is so telling about consultants. And Anna's right. As I'm reading this quote to you, it's not just Republican. Democratic consultants think the same exact way. So listen to what one guy said. If you actually think about this very selfishly, if Trump loses, I make more money. He loses, we go back to a semi-normal Republican Party that leaves more populist than I think a lot of people would like. We get to run all these challenger races and probably take back in 2 years. Maybe even gains on the state level because of the extremist Democrat administration. I make more money. So that's a very selfish view, and people have talked about that. So what he's saying is, I don't care if the leader of my party wins or loses. All I care about is making more money. Later, we'll pretend we weren't with Trump. And later, we'll lie to you in a different way. And the press will play along and we'll get all the money anyway. And for Democrats, the equal and opposite of that is, we don't care if Donald Trump wins. If Donald Trump wins, we make even more money, raising more money to oppose the boogeyman. And I take 15% of that money. So their Democratic consultants are thrilled that Trump won. They made so much more money because of it. So this is the sick game that's being played on all of us. And yet the press is almost completely mute on it. And so that's the situation we're in. And these are the people the completely unethical, amoral people who run our country.
Tucker Carlson versus Tammy Duckworth when we come back from the break. See you then.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your active ID more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
All right, back on the Young Turks. I want to thank everybody for all the wonderful happy birthday wishes to Anna. I can't read them all, but we appreciate every single one of them, especially all of you using YouTube Super Chat. I'll just read one. Priya Walia writes in, happy birthday, Anna, Queen of Salt. Have a great day, and thanks to all of you for your years of quality debate. Priya and all the rest of you, thank you so much, guys. We really, really do appreciate it. And in fact, let's check it on the thermometer one last time here tonight. $33,092 at tyt.com/go. This is so important to keep the show going and keep us strong and healthy and sustainable. So if you're going to give $7 or $70 or $700 on behalf of Anna, or 707, I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm just not going to do it. Okay.
Can I just give Randall, you're the worst. Can I give Randall some love in the Super Chat comments? He just says, thanks to Donald Trump, it's now safe again to say Merry Birthday, Anna, without being flogged or jailed.
Excellent. I love it.
So good. All right, let's get to our next story. Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth tore into Tucker Carlson following his ridiculous monologue questioning her patriotism to the United States or her love for the country. Now, keep in mind that Senator Duckworth did serve in Iraq. She is a Purple Heart recipient, and she lost both her legs when she was deployed in Iraq. On the other hand, you have Tucker Carlson, who is an heir, never had to deploy anywhere, and is a privileged, ignorant person who loves to do fascistic segments on his show. Here's an example of one of them.
Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois is a top contender for the job. You're not supposed to criticize Tammy Duckworth in any way because she once served in the military. Most people just ignore her. But when Duckworth does speak in public, you're reminded what a deeply silly and unimpressive person she is. Here's Tammy Duckworth from over the weekend telling us it's time to get rid of George Washington.
I know that you support changing the name of military bases named after Confederate leaders, but there are leaders like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson who were slave owners, and some people are demanding that their monuments come down too. So in your view, where does it end? Should statues, for example, of George Washington come down?
Well, let me just say that we should start off by having a national dialogue on it at some point.
A national dialogue, please. They're not looking for any kind of colloquy. What they want is a soliloquy. We speak, you shut up and listen. So what to make of all of this? Well, it's long been considered out of bounds to question a person's patriotism. It's a very strong charge, and we try not ever to make it. But in the face of all of this, the conclusion can't be avoided. These people actually hate America. There's no longer a question about that. And yet, paradoxically, at the same time, they desperately want to control America more than anything. And that leads to the most basic of all questions. Can you really lead a country that you hate?
Okay, important context of the story is that recently there have been some reports indicating that Joe Biden is considering Senator Duckworth as a running mate, which is exactly why Tucker Carlson felt the need to attack her like this. In response to that disgusting segment, she tweeted, "Does Tucker Carlson want to walk a mile in my legs and then tell me whether or not I love America?" And of course, she's referencing the fact that she served in the military and that she lost her legs when she was deployed in Iraq. It's just incredible. Like Tucker Carlson has no shame at all.
Yeah, well, no, there's actually another reason why he went after Tammy Duckworth, because he's smart enough to understand that trolling works. It works spectacularly for Donald Trump. And he knows that if you go after Tammy Duckworth's patriotism when she lost 2 legs for this country, people will not be able to resist talking about Tucker Carlson, thereby giving him further name recognition. And we did the story the other day about how he's thinking of running for president in 2024. If you're going to do that, you would do the things that Tucker is doing right now. That hateful speech that Trump gave during the 4th of July weekend that was panned by everyone, Tucker Carlson said it was maybe the best speech he's ever given. Why? Red meat, racism, defending Confederates. It was all there for him. Attacking Black Lives Matter, all the things that Tucker Carlson uses to gain popularity with his racist populist base. And so now everybody's talking about Tucker. Can you believe that he went after Tammy Duckworth and said that she hates America when she nearly lost her life for this country? You can't resist but talk about that, and Tucker knows that. And that's why he does it. And we've got to break out of this way of thinking like, oh, we think it's atrocious, so we're pointing out to people that it's atrocious. But for Tucker, that's nothing but good news for him because his base is atrocious. He gets more ratings and he's more likely to win if he runs in a Republican election if we keep telling people how hateful he is. That's not the bug. That's the feature for Republican voters. And Tucker Carlson is savvy enough to know that. By the way, I have to jump in, Cenk. She never said, let's get rid of George Washington. Yes.
No, she said, by the way, he cut the interview. Like, we didn't hear the rest of her answer. It was just, we should start a national dialogue, which is very different from what he alleged. She said that she just wants to get rid of George Washington. But guess what? Our history is complicated. It's nuanced. The people who we've learned about in our very selectively edited history books doesn't give you the full scope of who these people were and what they did when they were in positions of power in American history. So that dialogue is actually incredibly important. That's not the same as, oh, she wants to get rid of George Washington. She hates America.
Tucker Carlson is super dangerous because he's not nearly as stupid as the other Republicans. For a while, people talked about whether Sean Hannity would run for president. How about it, Hoss? That guy's an idiot. But Tucker's dangerous. So look at what he did there. He knows that she said national dialogue. She didn't say, let's get rid of George Washington. He put words in her mouth. He lied about her on purpose. And he knows that George Washington owned slaves, and that's why it would be an interesting dialogue. Hey, here's a guy who helped form the country, refused to be king, and had wonderful attributes. He also had terrible attributes because he owned slaves. That is a legitimate, super interesting intellectual conversation. Tucker knows that, but he turns it into demagoguery instead and saying, if you want to have that interesting conversation, you hate America. And don't worry, though, Americans. I, Tucker Carlson, will protect you from these America-hating people. So that's why he's the most popular show on Fox News, because he's the one who wraps up that same fear and hatred with the most sophistication and makes people feel better and intellectually superior, which is hilarious, as they do their form of racism and bigotry towards all others.
Yep.
Okay, so we got an amazing, giant postgame for you guys. I can't wait to share those stories. TYT.com/join or hit the join button. We'll see you there now.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.